when you're a guy that generates money,
Yeah.
people have a vested interest in controlling it.
A lot of people talk about stand-up comedy nowadays. There are a lot of great comedians who perform regularly across the country, but then there are a select few comedians who reach a coveted level of mastery at the craft of comedy that will catapult them into legendary status. That brings us to
Dave Chappelle.
Dave Chappelle.
Dave Chappelle.
Dave Chappelle.
Dave Chappelle.
Dave Chappelle!
Who is Dave Chappelle? Some people describe Dave Chappelle as the greatest comedian to ever live, a living legend of comedy, who graces the stage anywhere he decides to go up and perform. If you're a casual fan of comedy, you may not know that Dave Chappelle actually vanished from the face of the earth for a bit. This is where things get interesting. A man who seemingly had it all: a successful sketch show, a soaring stand-up comedy career, a loving and supporting family. What the heck made Dave Chappelle walk away from it all? Then, what made him come back and reclaim his status as a comedy legend? Also, what makes Dave Chappelle such a captivating and brilliant comedian who seems to just never miss? Say what you want about Dave and what he jokes about, but there's a reason that so many people buy tickets to see him live. There's a reason people continue to support him even when the media attacks him ad nauseum. By the end of this video, you will know exactly who Dave Chappelle is, where he came from, some of the amazing work he's done, his long absence from the limelight, his bizarrely timed return to show business, and what makes his style of comedy so mesmerizing and phenomenal. This is Dave Chappelle, the legend that returned. On August 24th, 1973, David Corey Weber Chappelle was born in Washington, D.C. His father's name is William David Chappelle III, and his mother is Yvonne Sion. His father, William, was a professor of vocal performance and the dean of students at Antioch College in Yellow Springs, Ohio, and his mother, Yvonne, is a Unitarian Universalist minister and worked as a professor and university administrator at several institutions including Wright State University and Prince George's Community College. Dave's mother was incredibly well-read, articulate, and intelligent, and this led to many different teaching opportunities for her. She also worked for Patrice Lumumba, who was the first Prime Minister of the Democratic Republic of the Congo. After being born in Washington, D.C., Dave's family resided in Maryland for a lot of Dave's early childhood. Dave would grow up in Silver Springs in Maryland, and he attended Woodland Elementary School from kindergarten to 5th grade. Dave's parents were very politically active, and through their work in the Maryland area, they became very well connected with many influential figures. They would often have guests at the house, and this led to Dave meeting a lot of different people at a very young age, such as American folk singer Peter Seeger and jazz vocalist Johnny Hartman. As a young man, Dave was always very funny and quick-witted, and he was like this with nearly every new person he met. When Johnny Hartman met the young Dave Chappelle, he was convinced that he would become a comedian because of how naturally charismatic and funny he was. Around this time, Dave started watching a lot of stand-up comedy, and he became fascinated with the art form. Unfortunately for Dave, at a very young age, his parents separated, and this led him to spend a lot of time in two different locations: Washington, D.C. with his mother Yvonne, and then every summer he would stay in Ohio with his father William. When Dave reached 15 years old, he attended Eastern High School, located in Washington, D.C., briefly, but eventually he would transfer schools to attend the Duke Ellington School of Arts. In his time at the Duke Ellington School of Arts, he studied theater arts for several years until he graduated in 1991. However, 4 years before he graduated, Dave would start performing stand-up comedy at the age of 14 years old in the Washington area. Some of Dave's comedic influences include Eddie Murphy, Richard Pryor, Chris Rock, and Paul Mooney. All throughout high school, Dave would do stand-up comedy on the side, with his mother supporting him and taking him to many different open mics in the area. He made progress quickly too, because after doing open mics for a little bit, Dave started doing some paid shows in the local Washington area. Then, Dave had something very cool and unexpected happen to him when he was just 17 years old. Dave had the privilege of being featured in a montage of random people telling jokes in the first episode of ABC's America's Funniest People, airing on September 13th, 1990. Check it out.
This is my impression of Batman fighting crime in my neighborhood. Excuse me, my impression of Batman fighting crime in my neighborhood. Robin. Yes, Batman. Didn't we park the car right here? I swear it was here a minute ago.
In this video of Dave Chappelle at 17 years old, it is glaringly apparent just how natural it was for Dave when it came to being funny on the spot. He had only been doing stand-up comedy for 3 years at this point, and he had already showed signs of having the comedic flair that one needs to be successful as a stand-up comic. Also, at 17 years old, Dave converted to Islam. Dave is very private about his faith. However, in a 2005 interview when asked about it, he said, quote, "I don't normally talk about my religion publicly because I don't want people to associate me and my flaws with this beautiful thing, and I believe it is beautiful if you learn it the right way." End quote. Furthermore, while in high school, Dave Chappelle worked as an usher at Ford's Theater, and while he worked there, he had the privilege of seeing many different performers, including many different stand-up comedians. This just added fuel to the fire and made Dave even more excited to perform comedy, and eventually, he decided stand-up comedy was what he wanted to do as a full-time career when he was just a young man still in high school. When he finally graduated, Dave decided to move to New York City to finally pursue his dream of being a stand-up comedian. Dave realized very soon that conquering the New York City comedy scene would be an uphill battle, but he knew he had the grit and perseverance to do it. One of Dave's first experiences performing stand-up comedy in New York was performing at Harlem's Apollo Theater in front of the amateur night audience. Unfortunately for Dave, he would be booed off stage that night by an angry audience. Dave recalled the experience being extremely tough for him, but also saying how it was the moment that gave him the courage to continue pursuing his show business aspirations. He continued working hard and showing his peers his drive and work ethic, and Dave quickly made a name for himself in the New York City comedy circuit. He even found himself performing comedy shows in the city's parks some days before or after doing open mics or shows in the comedy clubs just to get more repetition and stage time in front of more different people. After establishing himself a little more, in 1992, Dave Chappelle would appear on Def Comedy Jam at just 19 years old, which was an HBO television program hosted by Russell Simmons. Dave would do really well in his appearance on Def Comedy Jam, so well in fact that he would go on to win critical and popular acclaim from critics and fans.
I just got back from Los Angeles, California, man. That's all they were talking about was Rodney King this, Rodney King that. Them rides were fucked up, man. Let me tell you something. They looted a fucking donut shop. A donut shop, man!
This was one of Dave's first big surges of momentum as a comedian because his appearance was so popular, it would eventually lead to him becoming a regular guest on late-night TV shows such as Politically Incorrect, Late Show with David Letterman, The Howard Stern Show, and Late Night with Conan O'Brien. Dave developed a reputation for being a young rising star in comedy, and Whoopi Goldberg actually nicknamed him The Kid. Eventually, Dave had the opportunity to make his film debut and appear in a movie to play a major supporting role in Mel Brooks' Robin Hood Men in Tights, which was a comedy adventure movie shot in 1993, right before Dave turned 20 years old. He played the character Achu, and despite not being a main character, Dave still stood out to the viewers as incredibly funny in any scenes that he would appear in. He would continue to appear on TV, performing stand-up comedy on the show Star Search 3 different times, and Dave would end up losing on Star Search to comedian Lester Berry, and he'd go on to joke in the future about becoming much more successful than Lester was. In 1992, Dave was actually offered a really big movie role. He had been asked by Robert Zemeckis about playing Bubba Blue in the movie Forrest Gump. Unfortunately, Dave did not believe in the project, and he firmly believed that playing this character would be incredibly demeaning and that the movie would probably bomb anyway. He turned down the part, and even though the movie ended up being incredibly successful, Dave stuck by the fact that the character was incredibly demeaning and would not have sat well with him if he took the role. In addition to performing weekend stand-up gigs, Dave would often find himself honing his craft at Monday night open mics at places like Boston Comedy Club, which is located on West 3rd Street in Greenwich Village in New York City, in the late summer of 1994. Along with his continued stand-up comedy progression came more opportunities to be in television and movies. Dave Chappelle played another supporting role in an early Doug Liman film titled Getting In, which was released in 1994. Upon rejecting the role in Forrest Gump, Chappelle would act in a short film titled Bowl of Pork, which parodied Forrest Gump. The plot of the movie is about a slow black man who is blamed for the beating of Rodney King, the Los Angeles riots, and O.J. Simpson being accused of murder. The short film was released in early 1997, and it is very funny. Furthermore, Dave's status as a young rising star in comedy attracted the likes and attention of television network executives and developed developed numerous pilots, none of which were picked up for the development into a series. In the meantime, Dave would appear on a 1995 episode of ABC's popular sitcom Home Improvement. The storyline involved Dave Chappelle and comedian Jim Breuer asking Tim Taylor for advice on how to take care of their girlfriends. This episode would prove to be wildly popular given the attendance of Dave and Jim, and this led to ABC giving them all their own spin-off sitcom titled Buddies. However, after taping just a single pilot episode, Jim Breuer would be fired and then replaced with actor Christopher Garton. Dave Chappelle and Jim Breuer had incredible chemistry on the show together since they were both comedians and also close friends. Needless to say, Jim's firing before the show aired in 1996 was massively detrimental to the show because Christopher Garton simply could not recreate the chemistry between Dave and Jim. When the show finally premiered, the ratings were absolutely abysmal, and the show was canceled after just 5 episodes of the 13 episodes that were originally planned to air on ABC. As Chappelle continued to develop as a stand-up comedian, it was very common to see him also appearing in small roles in Hollywood projects. After the failure of Buddies, Chappelle proceeded and planned to star in another pilot. According to Dave, though, the network was incredibly uncomfortable with the cast being entirely black and that they really wanted to add some white actors to the cast. Dave ultimately opposed this request and subsequently accused the network of racism and a lack of professionalism. This led to Dave quitting the network and moving on with his career. Then tragedy struck in the Chappelle family when Dave's father, William Chappelle III, died on July 29, 1998 in his hometown of Yellow Springs, Ohio. The death of his father really rattled Dave and sent him into a deep introspective state. When this took place, Dave returned to his home in Yellow Springs, Ohio, and he actually considered leaving the entertainment industry for quite a while. He would go on to give this speech at his father's funeral. Check it out.
My dad, around the time he died, I'm pretty sure he didn't like my act. He actually told me, so I don't like your act. And it didn't make me feel bad because even though I'm a driven comedian, and it wasn't the kind of thing I did for my father's love. The fact that you guys are honoring my father, it says a lot about the school, which I never was a student at, but it was definitely a setting in my life. It says a lot about the community, and it says a lot about my dad. And I appreciate you, and thank you.
I find it incredibly heartwarming that Dave talks about how his father never understood his act, but that he never dissuaded Dave from his dream of being a stand-up comedian. It's also incredibly beautiful how Dave admired his father and had a wholesome relationship with him, and how he thanks the people in Ohio for allowing his dad the opportunity to be a good dude and to live a fulfilling purpose as an educator at Antioch College. If you want to watch the full closing remarks Dave had for his father's funeral, you can find it on YouTube. It is an amazing video to watch, and I recommend it if you're a fan of anything Dave Chappelle. After taking the appropriate amount of time off to mourn his late father, Dave eventually returned to New York to continue his career as a stand-up comedian. In the meantime, Dave would pick up another role in a science fiction comedy movie that would be titled The Nutty Professor. In this movie, Dave would play Reggie Warrington, a stand-up insult comic who targeted unsuspecting patrons of a nightclub, and he would get to share the screen with Eddie Murphy, who was one of his biggest comedic influences. This meant the world to Dave, and the two formed a great relationship from their time spent together on the movie. Then Dave would pick up yet another minor role in the 1997 movie titled Con Air as Joe Pinball Parker, an inmate convicted of heroin, armed robbery, and arson charges. Then a year later, in early 1998, Dave Chappelle would perform a comedy special for HBO Comedy Half Hour. Then the same year, he would appear in an episode of The Larry Sanders Show's 6th season titled Pilots and Pens Lost, in which he and the executives of the show's unnamed television network make fun of the treatment that scriptwriters and show creators were subjected to, as well as the executives' knee-jerk tendencies towards racial stereotypes. Later that year, Dave Chappelle would co-write the 1998 film titled Half-Baked. This movie was a stoner film that developed a cult following after its release. The plot of the movie is about a group of pothead friends who try to get one of their other pothead friends out of jail. The movie did so well at the box office that it netted a near $10 million profit after its release. This was a very popular movie that instantly became a classic stoner film, which led to Dave Chappelle's popularity continuing to propel forward. Then in December 1998, Dave would conclude the year by appearing in the movie You've Got Mail as a supporting character that was named Kevin, who acted as a close friend of Joe Fox, who was played by Tom Hanks. This was a good movie for Dave, but he didn't gain a significant amount of notoriety from it like he did the movie Half-Baked, despite the movie's massive success at the box office by nearly quintupling the production costs and profits. Then in 1999, Dave would appear in the movie Blue Streak alongside Martin Lawrence and Luke Wilson. Dave also played a supporting role in this movie as the character Tully. This movie had a lot of mixed reviews, but it was incredibly popular and more than tripled the production costs at the box office. This movie was a little more significant for Dave and yielded him a little bit more popularity than You've Got Mail. Then in 2000, the time came for Dave Chappelle to shoot his first hour-long comedy special with HBO titled Dave Chappelle, Killing Them Softly. The special was shot in Dave's birthplace of Washington, D.C. More on this comedy special later, but to put it mildly, this special is one of the tightest hours of stand-up comedy ever recorded. In 2015, Rolling Stone ranked Killing Them Softly number 6 on a list of the 25 best stand-up specials in films. I would say that 6th is still a little too high, and that it should be ranked number 1, but I'm biased. Then later in the year 2000, Dave would go on to co-star in the movie Screwed with comedian Norm Macdonald. In this movie, Dave plays Rusty P. Hayes, who works alongside Willard Fillmore, played by Norm Macdonald, where the two characters are figuratively getting screwed the entire movie. I would say more, but I don't want to spoil it for you, just in case you haven't seen it. The movie did not do well at the box office and was trashed by critics, but the movie meant a lot to Dave. According to Dave, he tried everything he could to get out of this movie because it was right after his father's death, and he felt inconsolable at the time. However, when he took the movie, he talked about how Norm was the only person in the world who was able to make him laugh during this period of his life, and how their work together on the movie really helped him. He also cites Norm Macdonald as one of the funniest and most important people he's ever worked with in his career. If you're a fan of this channel, you know how I feel about Norm Macdonald. Then in 2001, Dave Chappelle married Elaine Mendoza Irf. Together, the couple would go on to have 2 sons and 2 daughters. Anyway, then in 2002, Dave played Conspiracy Brother in the racial satire titled Undercover Brother, directed by Malcolm D. Lee. Then in 2004, Michael Gondry directed a documentary about Dave called Dave Chappelle's Block Party. This documentary detailed the time when Dave hosted a free concert in the Clinton Hill neighborhood located in Brooklyn, New York, on September 18, 2004. The concert featured many musical artists like Kanye West, The Roots, Erykah Badu, Mos Def, Dead Prez, and Jill Scott. In the movie, they can be seen performing music and in conversation offstage with Dave and others. Dave even flew in some of the residents from his hometown of Yellow Springs, Ohio, at his own expense to enjoy the concert. One of the highlights of this block party was the temporary reunion of the 1990s hip-hop group, the Fugees. Chappelle toured several cities in February and March 2006 to promote the film under the name Block Party All-Stars featuring Dave Chappelle. The film was released on March 3, 2006, and it was a massive success, yielding a nearly $9 million total profit. Also, in 2004, Dave Chappelle would go on to shoot a comedy special on Showtime titled For What It's Worth, which turned out to be another wildly successful comedy special. A lot of comedy fans consider this to be another one of the greatest comedy specials ever recorded. In sum, Dave Chappelle had an extremely hot start to his career as a comedian and actor because he made a lot of progress as an artist and starred in many big movies. More impressively, a lot of these achievements came when Dave was incredibly young, like shooting his first half-hour comedy special at 25 years old, his first hour-long comedy special at 28, and acting in a variety of highly acclaimed films throughout his 20s. With this evolution for Dave came a lot of status and recognition as a comedian, and this led to Dave getting one of the biggest and most pivotal opportunities that he would receive his entire career.
I'm out for presidents to represent me. I'm out for presidents to represent me.
On January 22, 2003, Dave Chappelle debuted his own weekly sketch comedy show on Comedy Central titled Chappelle Show. The show was written by Dave and fellow comedian Neil Brennan. Chappelle's show was absolutely massive. If you've seen Dave Chappelle somewhere but you can't quite put your finger on where, I would bet a lot of money this is the show you recognize him from. The show was meant to be a parody and satirical lens into many parts of American culture, racial stereotypes, politics, and pop culture. The content of the show most commonly featured comedy sketches written by Chappelle and other comedians. Secondly, it would feature musical performances by mostly hip-hop and soul artists. Some of the musical guests you would commonly see were DMX, Kanye West, Busta Rhymes, Ludacris, CeeLo Green, and many more. The format of the show often ran as follows. The show opened with Dave Chappelle being introduced over the instrumental from the song Hip Hop from Let's Get Free by Dead Prez. After being brought out, Dave would do a short stand-up segment for a live audience, similar to how a lot of late-night TV shows open up. Then after the intro and opening monologue from Dave, a pre-recorded sketch would play. The show provided some hilarious social commentary, and it was sometimes incredibly abrasive in the way it did so. One thing very different about Chappelle's show than most other sketch shows was the incredibly liberal and casual usage of racial epithets. Dave would perform sketches that cast light on intricate cultural topics such as prostitution, the entertainment industry, gun violence, and numerous drug references and music. The show often closed with a musical performance by a hip-hop or soul artist. The regular cast contained numerous comedians and other friends of Dave such as Donnell Rawlings, Bill Burr, Charlie Murphy, Anthony Barry, and many more. There were many legendary sketches that are still quoted and talked about by hardcore comedy fans today. Some of the notable sketches include A Moment in the Life of Lil Jon, Charlie Murphy's True Hollywood Stories, Frontline, The Racial Draft, Whack Arnold's, Wayne Brady's Show, and the Samuel L. Jackson Beer sketch. I can't talk about all of these sketches for time's sake, but my favorite sketch on Chappelle's show is definitely The Racial Draft because it's a parody of modern-day pro sports drafts, but instead of teams, it's an entire race. Celebrities such as O.J. Simpson and Eminem were drafted and either picked up by their own race or left behind. Not to mention the announcers are Dave Chappelle and Bill Burr commentating on the entire show, and that's absolutely hilarious.
It seems as though Tiger Woods is happy to be black, and that's a good thing. He lost all his endorsements. Tough break, nigga. It's always frugal.
Yes, well, Rob, she was born and raised Catholic, then she became a whore, but over the last decade, she has studied the Kabbalah.
I won't spoil what happens just in case you haven't seen it, but I'd recommend watching The Racial Draft for yourself. It's a fantastic sketch. Most of the sketches for Chappelle's show were also pre-recorded, and the audience reaction was used in lieu of a laugh track. This is different from modern-day sketch shows such as Saturday Night Live, where sketches are acted out in front of a live studio audience. The sketches for Chappelle's show were so funny that they never actually had to use a laugh track, according to Neil Brennan, with the only exception being the sketch Dude's Night Out, where they added a laugh track because there was virtually no reaction from the audience. The show also had many popular characters. Some of them often recurred multiple times, such as Tron Carter, Tyrone Biggums, Silky Johnson, Ashy Larry, and many more. Chappelle's show had 3 seasons with a total of 28 episodes. The show was incredibly funny. It ended up becoming the #1 rated comedy show on Comedy Central, and it proved to be a financially successful project for Viacom, which was the parent company of Comedy Central. Notice how I said it was financially successful for Viacom and not for Dave. Over several years of the show airing, Dave continued to do stand-up comedy and build his act. Even when Chappelle's show turned out to be wildly successful, stand-up comedy was always the most important outlet of comedy for Dave. His show started to become a problem for him after a while. One of the most popular lines from Chappelle's show referenced Rick James.
I'm Rick James, bitch. Enjoy yourself.
Based on the popularity, it was announced that Chappelle was in talks to portray Rick James in a biopic from Paramount Pictures, which is also owned by Viacom. However, Rick James' estate disagreed with the proposed comical tone of the film and shut down this project immediately. Then after this happened, in June 2004, Chappelle's show was set to launch the 3rd season of the show very soon, and Dave was performing stand-up in Sacramento, California, and in the middle of his act, there were people in the audience who kept shouting at him. And it wasn't just anything they were shouting either. They kept repeating, "I'm Rick James." And this is a reference to Charlie Murphy Hollywood Stories, which was a sketch from Chappelle's show, and the Rick James line just had an incredibly high level of repeatability. This made Dave absolutely livid, and apparently it caused him to walk off the stage. Eventually, a bewildered Dave returned to the stage and sincerely proclaimed to the audience how bad he felt. He said that Chappelle's show was literally ruining his life. He expressed his frustration with the network treating him poorly and making him work upwards of 20 hours a day, and how sketches are not his favorite type of outlet for comedy. He also talked about how upset it made him that the popularity of the show was now making it incredibly difficult for him to continue doing stand-up, which was, as we know, the most important thing to him. Finally, before Dave walked off stage again, he said to the audience, quote, "You know why my show is good? Because the network officials say you're not smart enough to get what I'm doing, and every day I fight for you. I tell them how smart you are. Turns out I was wrong. You people are stupid." End quote. The popularity of Chappelle's show making stand-up comedy harder for him to do, combined with how he was being overworked and underpaid for the show, made Dave absolutely miserable. The 3rd season of the Chappelle Show was set to air in February 2005, but this date would end up being delayed multiple times. The first delay moved the date back to May 31st, 2005, after production fell behind schedule in December 2004. The reason it fell behind was because Dave allegedly had gotten sick with the flu, to which Dave would later admit on the Oprah Winfrey Show that he was not sick at all, but that he simply took time off because of the stress that doing the show was causing him. In the meantime, Viacom had laid out an offer to Dave that would be talked about for years to come. Viacom, given the popularity of Chappelle's show, had offered Dave a $55 million contract to continue the production of the show for 2 more years while allowing him to do side projects. This deal entitled Dave to a portion of the DVD sales made by Comedy Central for the show. This probably sounds like a good deal to the average person with only a few dollars to their name, and perhaps it is a good deal for most people, but the important thing is it was not a good deal for Dave, and he refused to sign the contract. As mentioned, sketch comedy is not Dave's favorite style of comedy, and it really started wearing him down when it got in the way of his ability to do stand-up. After the first delay of the show, people were really eager to see Chappelle's show return. Then on May 4th, 2005, Comedy Central announced just weeks before the date they had promised that the production of the show would be suspended until further notice. Dave was incredibly stressed from the recording of Chappelle's show, and it was reported that Dave had taken a sabbatical by flying to South Africa by himself and staying at an undisclosed psychiatric facility. He did not tell his wife and kids where he was going. The only person that knew about this trip was his brother. Then on May 14, 2005, Time magazine had announced that one of the reporters, named Chris Farley of all names, had made contact with Dave Chappelle in South Africa and had interviewed him. From Dave, he deduced that there were no psychiatric treatments taking place or pending, and that this was a spiritual retreat that he needed to take to recollect himself given his immense amount of stress. He went on the record saying, quote, "Coming here, I don't have the distractions of fame. It quiets the ego down. I'm interested in the kind of person I've got to become. I want to be well-rounded, and the industry is a place of extremes. I want to be well-balanced. I've got to check my intentions, man." End quote. Despite Dave's transparency about why he disappeared from the country, this did not stop the mainstream media and press from spreading absolutely vile and baseless rumors about why Dave left. It became a common talking point in the press that Dave Chappelle was crazy or that he had problems with drugs, and that's what drove him away from Chappelle's show and the $50 million contract that he refused to sign. Some of these people would even go as far as to insist that the reasons Dave gave were inadequate and not the real reason he left. Truly nasty people. I was only 5 at the time this was happening, but for longtime Chappelle fans, I bet this really hurt to watch. Shortly thereafter, Dave returned to the States and proceeded to quell any rumors of drug use or mental instability that had been posed. And he once again reiterated that in the heat of the moment, the trip to South Africa was a spiritual retreat that was intended to keep his sense of reality outside the bubble of intense pressure and fame to keep his humor fresh. In addition to leaving the money behind, this decision would also cause a massive rift between him and his friend and longtime collaborator for the show, Neil Brennan. Then on July 14th, the president of Comedy Central, Doug Herzog, had stated that Dave Chappelle was welcome back anytime. However, Dave made it abundantly clear that he was still not ready to return and that he needed more time to decompress from the stress caused by the show. When Doug spoke with the press, he was very positive when talking about the negotiations with Dave, but he came to the conclusion that the show would probably not air in 2005. Then the New York Times reported a dinner between Dave Chappelle and Doug Herzog, where Dave had explained how the success was getting to him and that he, quote, wanted to be wrong again sometimes instead of always being right, end quote. If that wasn't the nail in the coffin, then this certainly was. In August, TV Guide did an interview with Charlie Murphy where he went on to say, quote, "Chappelle's show is over, man. Done. It took me a long time to be able to say those words, but I can say it pretty easily now because it's the truth." End quote. Then quite literally, within the same week, it was confirmed by Comedy Central that Neil Brennan had left the show and would not be returning. Despite the absence of Dave Chappelle, Neil Brennan, and Charlie Murphy's confidence in the show's demise, on December 5th, 2005, during Comedy Central's Last Laugh, they would promote the upcoming 3rd season of Chappelle's show anyway. This was incredibly puzzling to comedy fans who knew about everything going on. Then on January 24th, 2006, the program premiered uncensored on FX in the United Kingdom, starting with the 2nd season. The first episode of the 2nd season featured the slow-motion sketch, and this instantly became very popular in the United Kingdom. It was incredibly well received by critics. Gary Naismith said it was the finest piece of television he had seen all year. Then on February 3rd, 2006, Dave Chappelle would appear on The Oprah Winfrey Show, marking his first television interview since the production had stopped for Season 3 of Chappelle's Show. In his appearance, he details many reasons why he left the production of the show, including burnout, loss of creative control, and an uncomfortable work environment. I'll show you snippets of Dave's interview with Oprah and let him explain it better.
I wasn't walking away from the money.
Yeah.
I was walking away from the circumstances.
Would you say you lost your mind, sort of?
No.
No.
Not exactly.
Okay.
It's incredibly stressful. I feel like in a lot of instances, I was deliberately being put through stress. When you're a guy that generates money,
Yeah.
People have a vested interest in controlling. I mean, it's fun and all these things, but there's a tremendous amount of work.
The part that stood out to me the most was when Dave said if you work for a network and you make a product that's wildly successful and generates a lot of money, that the network then has a vested interest in controlling you to make more profits for shareholders. This is something that Kanye West has talked about as well within the darker side of the music industry. Dave went on to say that he was not completely turned off to the idea of finishing the production of Season 3 and that he'd even be open to a Season 4, but his demands would have to be fulfilled. One of Dave's demands was to ensure that half of the proceeds of future Chappelle Show DVD sales would go to charity. Not only would this be good for charity to receive a lot of money, but it would ensure that quality production would be of the utmost importance and not the money that the show made. Chappelle also claimed that if Comedy Central were to air the unaired episodes, that the show would be finished for good. After that announcement, Comedy Central stopped advertising the release of the third season for a period of time. Before I move on, something in particular that I noticed about Dave in his interview with Oprah is how on edge he is and how carefully he is choosing his words. People in the comments section noticed this as well. It almost seems like he's tiptoeing the line of what he can and cannot say about the shady style of business Comedy Central and Viacom are operating. Not to mention the fact that Oprah is talking to Dave like he is crazy for making the decision he made, when she should know better than anyone what he experienced and went through given her status as a celebrity in the entertainment industry. Unless she does know what she's doing and she's deliberately trying to frame Dave as if he lost his mind. We're getting into murky waters and territory here, but I'll keep it brief and say there's a lot of conspiracy theories about the types of foul play that occur in the upper echelons of the entertainment industry. Some of them are just hearsay, but there's also just documented evidence of some of the incredibly dark things that have happened in the entertainment industry, but you can research that on your own. I'll just say that it doesn't surprise me that Dave is being careful with his words, given the reputation of the entertainment industry and the character of the people who operate it behind the scenes. Dave also goes on to talk about the responsibility he felt when making the show given the two different types of people who watch. The people who are smart enough to know what lies behind Dave's metaphors in his show, and the people who just worship celebrities and anything they say.
I was doing sketches that were funny, but socially irresponsible. What I didn't consider is how many people watch a show and how the way people use television is subjective. A lot of people who will understand exactly what I'm doing. Then there's another group of people who are just fans, like the kind of people that scream, "I'm Rick James."
Dave was seriously concerned about what he was writing in these sketches because of how it would be perceived and taken by the latter group of people. Then to make matters worse, the people who were on the show and trying to convince Dave he was crazy, and they even tried to medicate him.
The whole time, they're trying to convince me I'm insane. They were trying to get me to take psychotic medication. I said, I'm not taking this medicine, man, because I know these people be trying to control you. It's very stressful for someone to constantly walk behind you and say, you're insane.
It's incredibly disturbing to watch this interview knowing how they treated Dave and how he's being so careful about what he says, almost as if he and his family's safety could be jeopardized if he blew the whistle as to what explicitly happened to him. I'd recommend you just go watch the interview of Dave on the Oprah Winfrey Show for yourself. Maybe I'm crazy or naive, but something just feels dark and off about the entire interview, and it's very uncomfortable for me to watch. Regardless, in April 2006, Comedy Central had wrapped up the production of Chappelle Show's third season, taping the live studio audience segments for the 3 episodes. In replacement of Dave, the last few episodes were co-hosted by Charlie Murphy and Donnell Rawlings. Comedy Central had advertised these 3 episodes as the lost episodes to spark curiosity, and they began airing on July 9, 2006. 2 weeks later, the third and final episode aired, and 2 days later, the DVD collection for the lost episodes was available to be purchased. Donnell Rawlings is a really good friend of Dave Chappelle. In fact, I saw Donnell Rawlings opening for Chappelle on October 29th, live here in Tampa, Florida. However, when the lost episodes were aired, he was asked if he harbored any regret or guilt for doing the lost episodes without Dave, and he went on to say, quote, "I'm a loyal person, but I know that as a professional, I've got to keep my career going, and I felt it was an opportunity for me, for people to see what I do is funny. Without knowing what Dave Chappelle's agenda is, the reason why he left with no communication saying, 'Hey guys, I feel this way, I would much rather you not be a part of this process,' had I had a conversation with Dave like that, then there's a possibility that I would reconsider me hosting it." End quote. As you probably remember from earlier, airing these lost episodes went against the conditions Dave had laid out if he were to ever return to Chappelle's show at Comedy Central. And after the episodes were aired against his wishes, Chappelle was interviewed by Anderson Cooper on CNN and reiterated that he would not be returning to Chappelle's show under any circumstances given the company breaching his personal terms. The show is still occasionally shown on television networks, and Dave's abrupt exit from the production of the show continues to be a hot topic in interviews and his own stand-up comedy act at times. In the special Bird Revelation, Dave actually talks about how Comedy Central treated him, and he draws a parallel between how a pimp treats his women. He also uses the book Pimp, which is the memoir of Iceberg Slim, to form an analogy about how artists in the entertainment industry are treated.
I'll tell you what happened, but I can't say it directly. There's a book to me that encapsulates my entire experience before I left the show. And the book is called Pimp. It's written by a guy named Iceberg Slim. Mileage on a hoe is a very wild concept. It means that pimps understand there's a finite amount of bad shit a person can do before they'll lose their fucking mind. And a good pimp can look at a woman that he's never seen before and call it, she's good for 500 fucks.
If you're interested in learning more about how Dave was treated and how he was screwed over firsthand, there's a stand-up segment on YouTube by Dave Chappelle titled Unforgiven, and in this, Dave talks about how he was taken advantage of for years. He also talks about how he was vulnerable, which led him to be swindled into signing away his name and sketch show in perpetuity throughout the universe, which is the language that is used in contracts written out for entertainers.
You should hear the terminology they say in these contracts. To use your name and likeness in perpetuity throughout the universe. Who the fuck could possibly know what that means? Nobody does. It's so complicated, in fact, that when you're a kid like me, you have to hire somebody to tell you what that means. And you sit down at a table and you do the contract game. And that's how I got with Comedy Central. But I signed the contract the way that a 28-year-old expectant father that was broke signs a contract. I was desperate, I needed a way out, and it wasn't good money, and it wasn't good circumstances, but what else am I gonna do, I said.
Dave Chappelle made over $500 million for Comedy Central with Chappelle's show, and they offered him $50 million. They legitimately tried to pimp the man, and he walked away from it all. That's the type of integrity that is so rare to find in a person nowadays, especially in the entertainment industry. As funny as Chappelle's show was, the exuberant amount of pain and stress it caused him was absolutely heartbreaking. At one point, Netflix actually started showing Chappelle's show on their app, and Dave called the CEO of Netflix personally and asked him to stop playing the show because of what happened to him and how it made him feel bad. Then the CEO immediately ordered the show to be taken off the platform. Thankfully, for Dave, when he released Unforgiven and talked about how he was treated by Comedy Central and Viacom, he publicly demanded that they pay him what he deserved while also suggesting that his fans should boycott Chappelle's show and not watch it unless his demands were met. Most of the time when artists do this, it falls on deaf ears. But Dave was paid lucratively by Comedy Central, and that's the happiest ending we could have possibly asked for. All in all, Chappelle's show was the biggest show on Comedy Central, and some people would even argue that Chappelle's show made Comedy Central what it is today. Despite its massive success, it really took a toll on Dave for a long time. Even though over a decade later, Dave was able to come to a favorable resolution, what happened to him still serves as a reminder of what the entertainment industry is capable of. This was the $50 million deal.
I'm out for presidents to represent me. I'm out for presidents to represent me.
After all the controversy unfolded with Chappelle's show and Dave leaving the country to visit South Africa, Dave would become very quiet. He detailed how he would spend a lot of time with his family back in his hometown in Yellow Springs, Ohio.
What did you do for those 10 years?
A lot of shit. I learned a lot. I was raising my kids. I was living a suburban life.
While taking time to focus on the important things in his life, he would close himself off to Hollywood in almost every single way and stay quiet for many years. Precisely a 12-year absence from comedy. However, I wouldn't say it was a complete radio silence from the public, because Dave would still make occasional unannounced appearances at numerous different comedy clubs and venues, and just do some time on stage. And he continued to do this following his post-Chappelle show return to stand-up comedy. For example, on April 15, 2007, Dave Chappelle showed up at the Laugh Factory in Sunset Strip completely unannounced, and proceeded to set a stand-up endurance record at this particular Laugh Factory. A stand-up endurance record is how long the comedian stays on stage, and Dave blew the previous record held by Dane Cook out of the water that night when he performed for 6 hours and 7 minutes. Then almost 8 months later, Dave would show up once again and break the record he set back in April by holding the stage for 6 hours and 12 minutes. He hadn't even done stand-up since the last time he was up at the Laugh Factory, and he just showed up on a whim and did another 6-hour set. Absolutely unbelievable. Eventually, Dane Cook would perform a 7.5-hour set to reclaim the throne as the stand-up endurance champion just a month later, and then Dave would return to attempt to break his record, but unfortunately he walked off after just 5 hours because he ran out of cigarettes. Classic Chappelle. After this, Dave Chappelle would disappear again for several months just to return to the public for the Inside the Actor's studio to interview the show's regular host, James Lipton. This was a celebration for the show's 200th episode, and it took place on November 11th, 2008. Then Dave would appear on this program yet again 5 years later for its 250th episode in 2013. Dave continued in this time to make random appearances at comedy clubs all across the country. In February 2009, Dave made an unannounced appearance at the Comic Strip Live located in New York City. He just showed up and waited until all the comics were done, and then he went up and did a 4-hour-long set, and the audience stayed the entire time. Then he vanished once again, only to turn up again in August 2011 to appear at the Comedy Jam located in San Francisco, California. It seems that in this on and off period for Dave, he took a lot of time to focus on himself and his family. Dave said on the Inside the Actor's studio interview that when his father died, he kind of just threw himself deeper into his work as a coping mechanism, but that this method didn't really allow him to fully process and mourn his father's death. He said this anguish is what inspired him to just book a flight and go to South Africa on a whim. I would hypothesize that this time away from stand-up really allowed him to dial back the life that had brought him so much stress, fully mourn his father's passing, and focus on being the head of his own household and doing as good of a job as he could to be present in his wife and children's lives. However, stand-up comedy was always Dave's favorite outlet, so occasionally when the itch to do a set was really persistent and he just couldn't ignore it anymore, he would make an appearance at a comedy club and just do some stand-up. This time away from comedy was exactly what Dave seemed to have needed after working so much, and this allowed him to come back bigger and better than ever before.
I'm out for presidents to represent me. I'm out for presidents to represent me.
In August 2013, Dave Chappelle had made his official return and was doing stand-up comedy on tour full-time. His very first comedy show back was when he was featured at the Oddball Comedy and Curiosity Festival. Even though the world eagerly awaited Dave's return to stand-up comedy, the road was not always smooth when he was first returning. Initially, when he was coming back, Dave had made a stop in Hartford, Connecticut to do some comedy when he encountered some extremely rowdy hecklers from the crowd. From the time he walked on stage to the time he walked off stage, he was being heckled. The heckling was actually so loud and obnoxious that it completely overpowered the sound on Dave's PA system, and this eventually caused Dave to walk off stage. Some of the heckling included chants of white power and other references from Chappelle's show that were completely uncalled for and out of line. This event was eventually written about by other members of the Hartford community who did not appreciate the way that the whole event went down in their city. Then a few days went by, and David stopped in Chicago, Illinois for a comedy show, and the website comedyhype.com actually captured the audio from the set of him handling the hecklers. Chappelle referenced the Hartford incident in his heckling tape, and he went on to say,
I know you guys read in the paper. I took a nasty spill the other night. But I swear to God it wasn't my fault. And I promise you, contrary to popular belief, I'm not on drugs. And the reason I know this crowd is good is because as soon as I said I'm not on drugs, the whole back tier booed me. Finally, I booed for the right reason. So much better than Hartford. I will never go back. I won't even go to Hartford for f***ing gas. I don't want anything bad to happen to the United States. But if North Korea ever drops a nuclear bomb on this country, I swear to God, I hope it lands in Hartford, Connecticut. On stage with that ring.
Despite Dave's adamant proclamation that he would never return to Hartford, Connecticut, in August 2014, Dave would return to Hartford for a surprise appearance at the 2014 Oddball Comedy Festival, and upon taking the stage, he would be greeted with a standing ovation from a thankful Connecticut crowd. Then in June 2014, Dave would make his first major New York City appearance in over 11 years. While visiting the Apple, Dave would make the most out of his visit by running the full stand-up circuit. To begin with, he would appear on The Today Show, The Tonight Show starring Jimmy Fallon, and Late Show with David Letterman to promote the 10 nights he would be performing at Radio City Music Hall, all while stopping by comedy clubs like the Comedy Cellar, the Stand, and the Comic Strip just to work out some of the jokes he would certainly be telling at Radio City Music Hall. Then in 2015, Dave Chappelle would appear in the Spike Lee film She-Rock, which would be Dave's first film role in 13 years. Things continued to project upward for Dave as the time went on. On November 12, 2016, Dave would make his hosting debut on Saturday Night Live the same weekend that Donald Trump shocked the world by winning the 2016 presidential election. The show would also feature A Tribe Called Quest as their musical guest for the weekend. When the air was tense, Dave wasted no time before tackling Donald Trump and the election head-on. He ended his monologue in high spirits after saying, quote, "I'm wishing Donald Trump luck, and I'm going to give him a chance, and we, the historically disenfranchised, demand that he give us one too." End quote. His performance on SNL received widespread acclaim from critics and audiences alike. At the 69th Primetime Emmy Awards, he received an Emmy Award for Outstanding Guest Actor in a Comedy Series for his appearance. Dave would end up donating the Emmy that he won to his former high school, the Duke Ellington School of Arts, while recording an episode of Comedians in Cars Getting Coffee with Jerry Seinfeld. Then shortly after his appearance on Saturday Night Live, Netflix would announce a 3-special deal with Dave Chappelle and that he'd be getting paid $20 million per special. The first 2 specials were released on March 21st, 2017. The content of these 2 specials were pulled deep from the personal comedy vault of Dave Chappelle. The first one was titled Deep in the Heart of Texas, and this special was filmed in Austin, Texas at the Austin City Limits Live venue in April 2015. The second was titled The Age of Spin, and this special was filmed in Hollywood, California at the Hollywood Palladium in March 2016. These specials were Dave's first comedy specials released to the public in over 12 years, and they proved to be wildly successful as Netflix announced just months later that these 2 specials were the most viewed comedy specials in Netflix history. Then the third one was titled Equanimity, and this special was filmed at the Warner Theater located in Dave's hometown of Washington, D.C. in September 2017. Then on December 22nd, 2017, Netflix announced they would be expanding the deal with Dave Chappelle to include an additional comedy special. As a result, Dave would record the final one titled The Bird Revelation at the world-famous Comedy Store located in West Hollywood, California on November 20th, 2017. The final 2 specials would then air on Netflix on December 31st, 2017. Then in January 2018, Dave would go on to receive a Grammy Award for Best Comedy Album for his 2 2017 specials, The Age of Spin and Deep in the Heart of Texas, at the 60th Annual Grammy Awards. Then in September 2018, Dave Chappelle's Equanimity comedy special received an Emmy Award for Outstanding Variety Special. That was pre-recorded. Then in October 2018, Dave would return to movies in Bradley Cooper's movie A Star is Born as Jackson Maine's best friend and retired musician Noodles. This movie turned out to be a massive success in the eyes of critics and fans, so much so that Dave was nominated, along with the rest of the cast, for the Screen Actors Guild Award for Best Cast in a Motion Picture. At this point, it seemed like, similar to Louis C.K., everything that Dave Chappelle touched with regards to comedy and movies just turned to gold instantly. Then later, in 2018, Dave Chappelle and Jon Stewart would team up as a comedy duo and tour across the United States and the United Kingdom. Then the same year, he would also go on to collaborate with comedian Aziz Ansari for 3 comedy shows in Austin, Texas at the Paramount Theater. Things just kept getting better for Dave. Then in February 2019, he was nominated for and won the Grammy Award for Best Comedy Album for Equanimity and Bird Revelation. Then on October 27, 2019, Dave received amazing news that he had been chosen to receive the annual Mark Twain Prize for American Humor at the Kennedy Center. The president of the Kennedy Center had this to say about Dave Chappelle, quote, Dave is the embodiment of Mark Twain's observation that against the assault of humor, nothing can stand. And for 3 decades, Dave has challenged us to see hot-button issues from his entirely original yet relatable experience, end quote. Out of all the amazing things that have happened in Dave's career, this was an incredibly special moment for him because of the gravity of the award he was going to receive. Not to mention, he would be honored by so many of his peers, such as Jon Stewart, Morgan Freeman, and even one of his comedic heroes, Eddie Murphy, would be in attendance. Then on August 26, 2019, Chappelle Chappelle's fifth Netflix special titled Sticks and Stones would air on Netflix. The special was very funny to most comedy fans, but when the critics reviewed the movie, they harshly criticized the special, calling it hacky, unfunny, and also massively inflammatory. Most critics hyper-focused on the jokes about the LGBTQ+ community and cancel culture. Obviously, the BS that the critics were spewing didn't resonate with the general population because despite the low critics rating, audience rating for the special was an astoundingly high 99%, which paints a completely different picture than that of the pretentious critics who posture themselves as the ultimate authority on what is and is not good art. Despite a lot of the backlash and criticism the special received from critics, Sticks and Stones won the Grammy Award for Best Comedy Album in 2020. It seems like despite trying to flog Dave publicly, the people as a whole still trust and appreciate him as an artist enough to continue consuming his products.
Boy, comes as a complete surprise. I mean, I read all the reviews, and they said so many terrible things. They were embarrassed for me. I had lost my way. It wasn't even worth watching. I hope all you critics learn from this. This is a teachable moment. Shut the f*** up forever.
Dave's return to comedy was long overdue in the eyes of his most loyal supporters, but he certainly made a big bang when he finally did return.
I'm out for presidents to represent me. I'm out for presidents to represent me.
In over 35 years of performing stand-up comedy, Dave Chappelle has built an incredible resume and discography. He has recorded 12 comedy specials. Throughout the video, I've talked about quite a few specials of his, but I missed several important specials. I'll be taking a quick second to tell you about all of the comedy specials that Dave has recorded over the years and where they are available to be viewed. His specials include Killing Them Softly, For What It's Worth, The Age of Spin, Deep in the Heart of Texas, Equanimity, The Bird Revelation, Sticks and Stones, 846, Unforgiven, Redemption Song, The Closer, and What's in a Name. A bulk of these specials are available to watch on Netflix. However, the outliers are Killing Them Softly, which is available to watch on HBO, For What It's Worth, which can be seen on Showtime, and 846 is available to watch on YouTube under the YouTube channel Netflix is a Joke. In an incredibly bizarre move, Dave had the specials Unforgiven and Redemption Song uploaded strictly to Instagram TV. However, based on the internet and its ability to spread information and content far and wide so quickly, these two specials can also be found on YouTube. Now, all of Dave's comedy specials are hilarious and brilliant in their own unique way, but out of all of these specials, my favorite two are Killing Them Softly and The Bird Revelation. Out of fear of being copyright claimed or potentially sued, I will just be paraphrasing parts of the special for you. First of all, Killing Them Softly is full of hilarious jokes that will have you bending over and bursting at the seams. This special is so funny it'll make your head spin. A lot of comedy fans consider this to be the tightest hour of comedy ever recorded in terms of sheer laughs and quality jokes. One of my favorite moments in the special is when Dave is talking about negotiations with his white lawyer and how when he says peace, they get confused by the slang and just say, "Have a good weekend." Then sometimes he takes it further and completely makes up a completely new slogan to throw off his lawyers even more. It may not sound like a super strong joke while I'm paraphrasing it, but I can assure you Dave's delivery could sell this joke to a deaf guy. It's absolutely astounding. Another one of my favorite parts is when Dave talks about the reason he'd never talk to a police officer while high. He says how he doesn't want to give them an excuse to use necessary force, and then says he wouldn't even talk to the cops while sleepy because it's too unpredictable. Then he does an act out of the cop, and it's incredibly funny how he ties it all together and ends the joke, but I'm not going to spoil it for you just in case you haven't seen it. Secondly, I love The Bird Revelation. The reason this special stuck out to me so much after watching it was because of the laid-back cadence and nature Dave had while he was sitting down on the stool and telling jokes about the troubling topics in Hollywood regarding the Me Too movement, celebrity harassment and assault allegations, and his own anecdotal experiences within Hollywood. I think the most amazing part of the special is when Dave shares how he was treated by Comedy Central in a very tongue-in-cheek way. He talks about the dark psychology of how pimps treat their women and use shady tactics to get these women to stay with them as long as they possibly can. The analogy he uses is from the book Pimp, which is the memoir for Iceberg Slim. If you're a big fan of Dave Chappelle, you may have already seen this clip where Dave talks about the book, but if you haven't, then good God, are you missing out on a bone-chilling story.
Why the fuck you think most of us work from 9 to 5? 9 to 6 might kill a bitch. Iceberg Slim was the one that broke down what a bottom bitch was. Does anyone know what a bottom bitch is? Anyone? What's a bottom bitch, sir?
It's your prostitute that's the best out of all of them, that brings in the most money.
That's right. That's exactly right. Are you black? That's right. A bottom bitch is a pimp's number one hoe. She's even a bitch that helps him keep the other bitches in line.
Part of the reason the story is so mesmerizing is because of the heinous and cryptic nature of these pimps, and the other part is when you realize that Dave isn't just talking about women who get pimped out, but also about himself when he was working with Viacom and Comedy Central and being deliberately put through stress to force more work out of him. This special might not have had as many jokes as Killing Them Softly had, but it certainly doesn't lose your attention from start to finish. Both of these specials are amazing and certainly two of the best specials in comedy history. Killing Them Softly is available to be watched for free on YouTube, and The Bird Revelation can be viewed on Netflix. Also, I saw Dave Chappelle live recently, and he has a new Netflix special that will be coming out very soon that will be titled The Lunatic's Manifesto. That's what I saw on the Jumbotron when I was watching Dave. I really hope he doesn't change it because then I'll look really dumb, but oh well. All in all, Dave Chappelle has put out an immense body of work that is full of jokes and insight as to what Dave believes deep down. His comedy specials are certainly not an exception to that, and they are absolutely fantastic.
I'm out for presidents to represent me. I'm out for presidents to represent me.
Dave Chappelle undoubtedly was, is, and always will be one of the most influential comedians of all time. So many of the best comedians working today cite him as a hero and a contemporary, such as Shane Gillis, Cat Williams, Kevin Hart, and many more. He is adored by comedy fans everywhere, and the world is always craving more Dave Chappelle content given his ability to be effortlessly funny while also flexing his wit and intellect obtained from his own personal experiences. However, some people do not appreciate Chappelle's work, and they claim that he is a hateful, bigoted rich guy who does nothing but punch down in his comedy act. A lot of these people are mentally ill morons who wouldn't know good comedy or good art if it whacked them in the face, so it must be taken with a grain of salt when you hear this. Just because you were personally offended by something a comedian said does not mean there was any hate or ill will behind what they said. You can be offended as much as you please, but that doesn't automatically make you right. I don't care what Vox tells you. If you don't like his comedy, then don't fucking watch it. It's literally that easy. Whether you like it or not, millions of people watch Chappelle's comedy, resonate with it, and find it hilarious. That doesn't make them bad people. It just means they have a different sense of humor than you. This rhetoric from these types of people also feeds into the insane idea that comedy should always punch up, which I do not agree with. I believe that whether you are punching up, down, or sideways doesn't matter just as long as the joke you're telling is funny, and the audience will be there to let you know what they think. If you're punching up and the joke sucks, it doesn't matter because the joke sucks. People want to laugh and not be lectured at, so shut the hell up and move on with your life. I can assure you that Dave Chappelle doesn't give a rat's ass whether you watch his special or not, and it will not make an impact on how much money he makes. If you want to argue that Dave Chappelle's new specials are not as funny or comically sound as some of his older work, then that's your prerogative. But pretending Dave is some type of monster for making jokes about the community is a load of crap, and you should just grow up. Anyway, whether you love him or hate him, Dave Chappelle's impact on comedy is certainly something that cannot be denied. From starting stand-up comedy at 14 years old, to being a supporting role in movies, to making some of the funniest sketches ever seen on Chappelle's Show, to winning the Mark Twain Prize for American Humor, Chappelle has proven himself to be a formidable force as an artist and comedian who has mastered the art of making people laugh, and he will continue to prove every single special why he is one of the greatest men to ever pick up a microphone and tell jokes. This has been Dave Chappelle, the legend that returned. Hey everybody, thank you so much for watching the Dave Chappelle documentary all the way to the end. I really appreciate you guys watching the videos and supporting my content. The easiest way to support my channel right now is to like this video, subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and share it with a friend you think would also like it. That's a free way for my channel to grow and for you guys to help build this community up. Dave Chappelle is certainly one of the greatest comedians to ever live, and I think I did the best job I could have possibly done to honor him with this documentary. If you guys want to take your support for my channel to the next level, you can check out my Patreon page. For as little as $5 a month, you can see some exclusive content, you can see videos early, and you can also suggest future documentary topics for me to do. So check out the Patreon and consider that. Quick shout out to my patrons, Jason Murray and Crossblocker, for supporting me financially. Otherwise, if you guys just want to support me, liking and subscribing is more than enough. I really appreciate you watching once again, and I hope to see you guys in the next documentary when it happens. Make sure you take care of yourselves, your family, your friends, your loved ones, anybody that's important to you. I love you, and I will see you in the next documentary.